Welcome back, everyone. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower, and I'm joined today with a very special guest, my new friend, Stephen Martinez. We're going to continue on with another episode of our Leaving Idolatry series. But before we get started, everyone, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, give us a big thumbs up, and check out the description for all the possible resources, books, etc. that you could need as you go along this Noachide or Exodus out of Christianity life. But all right, Stephen, first question. What was your religious background prior to your Exodus out of Christianity? What vein of Christianity were you affiliated with?
Well, I actually have several backgrounds. My family was originally Catholic before I was born, but then they transitioned into evangelical Protestantism, more toward the evangelical side. My mother was kicked out of her home parish
Oh, wow.
because she was very how they would say spirit filled,
Ah, yes.
and so very charismatic. And so the priest approached her one day and said, "Hey, there's another parish down the road.
Yeah, yeah.
They like your kind down there more than we like here."
Down, yeah.
So the time passes. I'm born in Assemblies. I go to Assemblies of God Church for most of my life. Starts leaning towards Baptist as Assemblies of God just kind of starts fading out a little bit down here.
Oh, okay. So you kind of
So,
started working your way out of that charismatic type Pentecostal type
yeah,
thing.
it was most of my parents though. It's just them moving from church to church, trying to find that home church where they felt comfortable.
Right.
And so we kept kind of going from church to church. We ended up in a church that my dad still attends to this day. My mother had a stark disagreement with the youth pastor at the time, and so
Oh, wow.
when she left, I kind of left as well.
Mm-hmm.
But around this time as well, I was meeting someone that would play a very significant role in my life, my ex-fiance.
Okay.
And she attended a Protestant Anglican church.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a very large jump to go from Baptist, non-denominational mostly,
Mm-hmm.
to very Protestant Anglican, very liturgical kind of church.
Right.
So it was a huge jump, but that's kind of where I started getting into the theology of Christianity.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's probably about as close to Catholic without being Catholic as it gets, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I have Catholic friends now that say the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I started getting most of my education. I went to a private Anglican school. It's a private school run by an Anglican deacon.
Okay.
So it was very Christocentric. Everything we did was heavily influenced by the Christian religion. We came at philosophy from a Christian standpoint,
Mm.
even modern philosophy, and so eventually it got to the point where some of us were even mocking some of the more modern philosophers.
Right.
And so it was a very Christian environment. There was no reason for me to question anything.
Mm.
Now, to give some background for this, previously in my life, I had studied esotericism to an extent, Hermeticism in particular. I had read the Kybalion, the Lesser Keys of Solomon. I know that's not necessarily Hermetic, but in a variety of other texts.
Right.
And so I already had some amount of information backlog so I could recognize certain things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as I began to study Christianity, I began to say, really familiar. Where have I read this before?
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a small time where I didn't study, a couple years where I wasn't studying that stuff anymore. And so I didn't really notice it too much in Christianity. It wasn't until I started picking it back up. And
Right.
that was primarily due to my ex-fiance. Her family was Protestant, but her mother's side tend to lean more towards Wicca, Druidism, spirituality.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a weird clash in her family because her father's
Yeah.
side was very, very Protestant, raised Protestant, almost Catholic. And so it was that weird dynamic that kind of always gave me that little pull back into that weird mystery
Right.
religion, esoteric
Yeah.
studies.
How did that? Wow. How did that go? A relationship of a Wicca and a very fundamental Protestant.
Sorry, I'm
How,
one of my roommates. You're good.
you're fine. You're fine. How was that dynamic? I mean, I'm sure you were at your fiance's house rather regularly, so that had to be. I mean, just seeing that interaction had to be kind of
Well, the interesting thing was her father had also kind of found a way to. I think he saw the connections between Hermetic philosophy and how that's influenced modern Wicca and such, and how it also has influence in Christianity. And so he saw these links, and so that's how he kind of justified it all.
Okay.
And so, in a sense, I begin to do the same thing. That's where I start piecing it together from my previous knowledge. Going, wait a second, this all kind of fits together. It can kind of work.
Right. So you have all this knowledge. You've been studying esoteric texts, etc. So you're starting to get a pretty big picture. So what was the point? What was the verse? What was the aha moment really that started the Exodus?
Well, it was a combination of multiple things. So my ex-fiance left me the same day my mother died.
Oh wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
She passed at 5 o'clock on December, I want to say December 5th. And then at 5:05 that same day, I had called my ex-fiance trying to get some sort of comfort, and she said, "I'm done. I'm through. I can't deal with this." And that was it.
Hmm. Wow.
So I essentially lost all my support ropes in that sense in one single day, one fell swoop.
Wow.
That sent me spiraling down into a very deep depression. But it was in that depression that I started kind of uh, grabbing back to what I was more familiar with. I got more in depth into Christianity,
Hmm.
made a very close friend during this time, and it's actually this friend that plays the most vital role.
Wow.
So uh, she was a very, very good friend of mine, and we knew each other going all the way back to the Anglican Church, but she was not Anglican, she was Baptist. She
Okay.
mostly came to visit because she had friends in the Anglican Church, and she always stuck with the very on fire Jesus group. And so, wanting to have that connection, since I had just lost all my support, I jumped back into Christianity
Yeah.
hardcore.
Hmm.
And it was a little bit after going back to studying things, mostly to defend the faith that I now held so dearly, trying to defend it. It was actually around the time that I ended up running into the videos of Rabbi Tovia Singer.
Hmm.
And I think we discussed this. I spent 3 months. I watched one of his videos. I'd study up, find an argument. Ha! You can't fool me, Rabbi. Feeling so proud of myself.
Yep.
But there
Yep.
was always this underlying tension of me not wanting to watch certain videos that he had put out, in
Right.
particular concerning sacrifice, because I wasn't really studied on Leviticus. I had
Mm.
been told don't study it. It's very difficult to understand, and so I stayed away from it. Did what all Christians do, and we don't touch it.
Mhm.
And
I couldn't agree more.
finally,
Couldn't.
finally, I said, you know what? I want to see why Judaism and Christianity aren't getting along. Why aren't they working? Judaism is supposed to be the foundation of Christianity. So
Right.
why aren't they getting along? They should be working together without issue.
Mhm.
So I took the dive and I started studying. I wanted to see what his perspective was. And it was the moment of him saying the difference between definite or sorry, I forgot the word, intentional and unintentional sin.
Yes. Right. Right.
And when he said that, because in Hermetic philosophy, there's this big deal, it has this big thing about intention.
Mhm.
And in spirituality and magic in particular, which is again my forte, there's always this big deal with intention. And so if there's no intention, you can't really technically be held accountable in that sense.
Right.
And so it occurred to me, well then, if Jesus could only die for unintentional sins, then he can't die for sins of the world. Therefore, and it's only these little problems that I had always kind of shoved into the back because we kind of used, like I said, that Hermetic philosophy to kind of justify things.
Right.
Now that was coming back and saying, no, that doesn't work either. Christianity's a breed apart. It's something else, something very different. But
Yep.
it takes from so many different places. That's why so many different groups will say, well, we have that in our tradition. So maybe Christianity is the truth.
Right.
Christians love to do that. They
For
love to
sure.
say, oh, well, this was a precursor to Jesus. Clearly.
Yeah. Like across different cultures where Christianity has flourished, whether it be, Europe or South America or, Ethiopia, etc. You're seeing no two traditions are even remotely similar, you know, and it's just like the parentage, Roman Empire, the Romans were very good at not so much having originality, but adapting the previous things they thought were good and kind of rewrapping it into their own. Yeah, so we definitely see that same exact idea as you mentioned throughout all the different traditions of Christianity. So
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of what got the ball rolling towards my theory. So, like I said, while I was in this pit recovering Christianity, I made these discoveries, and when I had that aha moment, it felt like the world crumbled from under me.
Mm-hmm.
Because up until this point, all I had left was Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see that getting dragged away from me was terrifying. And I reached out to Rabbi Tovia Singer over the website of Jews for Judaism, and he sent me a very encouraging email, and that email became very important to me because it gave me some strength in that dark moment of I'm going to lose a lot more now that I'm stepping away from Christianity. Because again, all my life I had spent in the Christian religion. My education was through Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I had was through Christianity, through the church. And so to suddenly
Oh.
say goodbye to that, it was just like, okay, I'm going to lose a lot here. And I did. I lost a lot of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that honestly did send me spiraling down for a little bit longer as well. But it was in that despair, that loss that I was experiencing, that I found that spark. It just kind of clicked. And I always use the example of the story of the Parde when Benzoma is, when he goes outside.
Mm-hmm.
He goes outside. I say it feels like I came inside. Like I finally inside for the first time. Like what just happened? It was like a whole reality shift in that moment.
Right.
And I realized if my theory holds true, then people I care about, those people that are still Christian, they're in grave danger.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's what sent me down this road. I said, I can't leave them to that. And I
Wow.
thought about that friend of mine, like I said, she played that very important role of trying to be that safety net for me, try to be that escape rope and lead me to safety of what she thought was safety.
Mm.
And I said, I can't leave her to that either. I have to try something.
Yeah.
I have to at least try and put the information there for them. So
Yeah. Well, you're definitely doing the right thing. You can tell it's a selfless journey, and for myself, I wanted to be, I was a minister in the Pentecostal vein of Christianity because I wanted to, what I thought was spread the good news. You want to save people, and when your whole worldview gets turned upside down, as you just described, it's the same thing. I would have never started this channel if it was all about being selfish, But we try to emulate Hashem in the world. You try to emulate God in the world, and all we can really do is just tell people the truth, right? So yeah, it's very commendable that you want to do that and that you want to come on here and tell your story about how your worldview got shifted. But Baruch Hashem, he pulls us out of it, and he's the one who gives us the strength, So just keep on keeping on, man. That's all we can do. But keep on studying. If I always say in these interviews, if there's one thing, I don't know how much you interact still with Christians. Seems probably a decent amount if you're trying to help people out of Christianity, So the one thing I say is they can insult us, they can tell us we're going to hell, they can do whatever they want, they can try and take things from us, but what they can't take away is our knowledge. So study, get closer to Hashem, and he'll carry you through it. But moving forward, next question.
Nervous as can be.
What was that? Sorry.
I mean, he's carrying me through this interview. I'm nervous because I've always been nervous in interviews
Oh,
or situations.
You're doing awesome. Yeah. Next question. When you were finding these things and developing your theories, and did you go to any clergy, any minister? Did you bring these things up? And if so, what kind of response did you get?
I brought it up to several people one priest who is a friend of mine. He runs a parish here or out in Arlington. I brought it up to several pastor friends of not only myself but of my fathers as well, and I brought it up to several small group leaders, both of whom were pretty quick to say I was confused. One of the priests was in tears. He knew another priest who had actually stumbled upon the same thing and completely abandoned his faith in Jesus, but still runs his own parish.
Wow.
And so he was in tears. He said he's
seen
this coming up.
If I could take a minute to comment on that, because that hits home. Man, that's tough. When your livelihood starts falling upon this, I mean, I was at the church I was a part of, I was paid youth minister and in-home evangelist, etc. Listen, people, I understand if you're on a payroll and you have a family to support and all that, but please just seek Hashem about it. That's such a tough situation, but I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but if that's just something you need to spend a lot of time in prayer and meditation about, because that's such a hard situation to be on a payroll. This is what's putting food on your table, but yeah, there are people who are willing to talk about this, willing to, help you out. Just reach out if you're having these questions, but feel like you're handcuffed in a situation that you can't get out of. There's always a way out. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because that definitely hits home with me. So, yeah, go on.
But it was rough because mostly the pastors, the priests were more open about it, and I think that's just due to the background that they typically will have. A priest will typically have a different educational background than a pastor.
Is this Catholic, Anglican priest, Orthodox?
Anglican, yeah, Anglican. And so the pastors were more quick to just kind of just cut the conversation, honestly.
Dismiss all the claims.
They didn't even want to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
And the small group leaders, they were quite cross with it. They did not like that I was bringing up these questions. They would say I was confused, say I was misunderstanding things, and I was confused when they said that, because I was saying, no, this is our understanding of this stuff. Like this my theory, if it's correct, is coming out of the information we use as Christian teaching, as Christian theology.
Right.
I mean, its own theology proves my theory, is what I was trying to argue with them. They didn't. And listen, I said, this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big deal.
Definitely.
And I found out that the Catholic Church has even considered my theory in the past.
Wow.
Prior to me finding it, it was something that was theorized by the Catholic Church, and they said, yeah, it could be, but they don't really put too much credence in it, or really look into it, obviously.
Right. For sure. You had mentioned that there was some, dismissive conversation, some anger, and it seems like this was more on the side of the right-wing fundamental side of Christianity, which also I can totally relate with. Did they spiritually abuse at all? Was there the insults, the ostracism, that type of thing?
Not so much from the priests or pastors, but from the small group leaders. I was kicked out of the group. When I brought up the questions, and I will acknowledge I probably sounded slightly accusatory because I was in shock when I was finding this stuff out.
Definitely.
I was probably quite hysterical. But to not even consider it and try and say, hey, calm down, let's discuss it, instead just say, you're confused, don't talk to anyone about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that just takes me back.
Yeah.
That's not how that should be done. This is information that needs to be discussed. If I'm incorrect, if I'm wrong, then correct me.
Right.
Show me that I'm wrong.
That's the thing. Everything you were bringing to the table is so far over their heads, so far over their pay grade. They had no idea what you were talking about, probably, to be honest with you. No, most Christian clergy on that side of the spectrum doesn't really have a whole lot of formal teaching. I mean, I understand the priest side. They definitely have a much more traditional schooling, trained in their tradition, etc. The right side of things, I mean, a 4-year degree and that's it. And it's normally by a school that's not even accredited. You know what I mean? So it just goes to show that you were bringing things to the table that were so far out of their worldview's realm. They probably just had no idea what you're even talking about. So that's just my third party outside perspective on this, knowing what I know from, how the fundamental schooling works, But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I can see it as
sounds like you definitely take the time to do your research, and that's most important. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Once you start getting into the real esoteric side of things, definitely need a teacher for sure.
it's
Definitely.
dangerous to research esoteric stuff without having a good foundation, because that's where you can easily go astray.
Right, right.
I'll use this as an example. Dr. Justin Sledge, he's brilliant. Uh, I remember in a video he discussed the Necronomicon, and he made the same observation I had. And so this is just an observation that I had made, kind of browsing through the Necronomicon on my own terms. But
Right.
to hear him make the same observation,
Yeah.
it's clearly a trap, magically speaking, because
Hmm.
there's a way to summon these creatures, but no way to banish them back out. So it's essentially a trap. Anyone who practices magic's not gonna fall for it. That's true. I read
Right.
through it and said, so where's the second part? Like I thought there had been a second book,
Yeah.
but there wasn't. And so when you have that kind of mindset where you're used to working in this kind of world, so to speak, when you're familiar with it, you can catch on to small little details and go, why would they say that like that? Why
Hmm.
would they phrase this like this? Why is this formatted like that?
Yeah. Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, Dr. Justin Sledge, he has a YouTube channel, brilliant. It's called Esoterica. Check him out, everybody.
Brilliant.
Yeah, he's very good. Um, his niche is definitely just taking antiquated esoteric documents and breaking them down. But yeah, that in itself brings me to say, um, people may take that route and try to study Kabbalah. I cannot stress enough. Just stay away from Kabbalah unless you have someone that's extremely qualified to be teaching it.
Yeah,
You know,
if I
it's
may
no
interject here.
joking matter. Yeah. So,
If I may
um,
interject here on that. I have
sure.
several books on Kabbalah, but I agree with you on be very careful, because several of those books I picked up as examples of why you should be careful. As when you open them, one of them is actually a Christian Kabbalistic text,
Oh wow.
which essentially butchers
Mm,
proper Jewish Kabbalah, and another is a hybrid of Druidism and Kabbalah.
mm,
And
wow.
so you got to be careful, because you'll pick up books like this at your local bookstore. It says Kabbalah on the cover, and while it is in a sense a strain of Kabbalah, it is not Jewish Kabbalah. It's not authentic, true Kabbalah
Right.
in that sense. And so it would be very careful and know what you're reading. And you
Hmm.
really won't know that until you've studied it, until you have the foundational knowledge.
Right. Right. Yeah, and a true understanding of Torah, Tanakh, the Torah Shabbal Peh, Shas, etc. You need so much prerequisite knowledge to even be ready for the deep esoteric understandings of things. So I couldn't harp on enough. Get your nose in Torah. Find yourself a teacher. This is to everybody. If you are interested in these esoteric things, because I've been noticing a lot that it seems a lot of people who are coming out of Christianity, especially like the charismatic Christianity, are very, very into like the esoteric side of Judaism. Because I feel like that's all Christianity brings to the table is you have a spiritual experience, right? So it seems this is just my observation that that vein of Christianity is bringing people out and they're very interested in esoterics. Just if I could give any advice, just get your nose in the books, find yourself a good rabbi, find yourself a study partner, and just dig in, learn some Hebrew, yeah, and just get acquainted with the prerequisites. Not that esoterics is bad. it's just one of those things that if you start taking the wrong turns, I see this all the time too, is Christians who are trying to use Kabbalah in their arguments, and it's like, what are you even talking about? You're being taught by someone who has no idea what they're talking about,
Right.
So, right, that's the thing, we need to be really careful, I really believe we need to be careful and know who we're learning from,
Exactly. A lot of my interns in the paranormal business, they want to learn how do you know so much about esotericism? How do you learn all this about magic? And they want to study all the stuff I've studied, and I explain to them, okay, well, you want to start with that? I hand them the small little book, and they're, what do I do with this? What's the foundation of all this? And then you got to read Plato, and then you got to read Socrates, then you got to go over here, and then you got to go over here. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to get them the foundation because they all want to study such diverse
Right.
forms. And I explain to them there is so much that goes into these. These were not formed one night out of whole cloth. These were combinations of years, many individuals putting their lives into forming these
Mhm.
these concepts.
For sure.
So to try and understand them just off the bat without the foundation, and for Kabbalah, the foundation is Torah. Foundation
Mhm.
for everything is Torah. And
Yeah.
so if you disregard that and then you can jump straight into the Kabbalah with no knowledge of Torah, you're gonna be led astray. And books like the Christian Kabbalah book I have on my shelf right now, you're gonna find yourself reading books like those, and you're not gonna understand a word of real Kabbalah.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. So moving forward, like, what's your plan? What how are you gonna continue on this Torah path?
Yeah. And that was the question for a while. Like I said, when I fell into that deep pit right before I had that spark, I had already begun having thrown myself deep into Christianity, begun in deliverance ministry and stuff like that. That's where I kind of started my paranormal investigation business.
Yes, like getting breaking people free of demonic possession and that type of thing.
Deliverance ministry was the big
Right.
thing. Yep. And so when I was in that pit, it also felt like Grand Prairie Paranormal was dissolving as well. I felt like I had wasted my time on it. I think it was a waste of everything. What was I doing in my life at that point?
Mm.
And I had always loved paranormal stuff. That had always been my jam. Like I said, I got into studying magic and all that when I was really young because it's just my jam. It's what I love doing. And I said, I'm useless. In the regular world, I'm kind of useless. What can I do? I can't even start a fire with 2 sticks. I can't go camping. You need me to help you survive. I can't help you catch fish unless I have dynamite. So
Yeah.
like I'm kind of useless. And I said, no, I have a skill, a very unique skill when you think about it.
Mhm.
I can parse these things out because of my background. I can figure these things out because of what I do. And because of my analytical mind, I can piece together things that most people kind of glance over most of the time.
Right.
And so I decided put it to use. So I grabbed what was left of Grand Prairie Paranormal, slung it over my shoulder, and climbed out of that pit. And now we focus primarily on one. Most paranormal occurrences aren't actually paranormal. There's very logical explanations.
Yeah.
But we try and draw the very fine line between what's actually paranormal and if someone is actually having mental problems, maybe they're mentally unstable, whatever it may be. And
Right.
so we try and find people who are suffering, who are mentally suffering. If someone calls us to a case and we know it's not, but we know it's something going on in their head, then we try to point them in the right direction. We try and get them to get counseling. If it's paranormal, we're more than happy to help, obviously, but um, we primarily focus on trying to help people, and especially people that are in Christianity. What I've particularly noticed within people coming out of Christianity, is very much what you noticed, is there's this hunger for spirituality.
Mhm.
Christians have this hunger because they're introduced to a very deep spiritual thing, but it's so think of it as it's so thin.
Right.
There's no
Right.
sustenance.
Yeah.
And so how I describe it is they're like children, they're hungry, they're starving for Hashem, but they don't know how to get because Christianity blocks it. It
Yeah.
puts Jesus in front and says Jesus is your mediator. You want God, you got to go through Jesus.
Exactly.
And so that deprives them of any real sustenance.
Mm-hmm.
So when they leave Christianity, now they're looking. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that in and of itself is spiritual abuse, and that leaves them mentally starving. So they just continuously float around trying to find truth wherever it guides them. They don't know how to recognize real truth. They don't
Mm-hmm.
recognize how to feed themselves, how to understand. They don't know how to do anything beyond what a child could do. Because Christianity, I think, I would say, spiritually cripples people.
Definitely, for sure.
And so that's what we really seek out. Because typically,
Because
people that are
that's a crutch. You only need a crutch if
is
you're crippled. Yeah. So.
and so a lot of people when they're trying to walk, and to go off your example, when they're trying to walk, and Pray Paranormal, we really focus on helping you learn to walk, helping guide you to Torah, helping guide you to Hashem, that you can learn to walk. Because there's no better
That's
healer.
very beautiful. You
There's
know.
no better healer than Hashem. And
Oh.
so instead of seeking these spiritual things, which they are there, but instead of seeing them as a Christian does, and I always say Christians live in a very fantastic world
Oh,
of
definitely.
demons and magic and
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yep.
gods in the sky, and it's a
Right.
very fantastic world. But when you live in this world for so long, and I experience this myself, it dilutes your perception of reality.
For sure.
And I believe that they have a very diluted sense of reality. And
Yeah.
so
I
they
mean,
need help being guided away from it.
look at some of their traditional, like, not necessarily esoteric, but esoteric in a sense. Whether it be the Divine Comedy or Paradise Lost. These aren't even anything close to canonical texts, and so much of what the Christian worldview revolves around comes straight from
Yeah.
these texts.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just, it's all a storybook.
Yeah. And so
And
many Christians get caught up
that
in that.
itself is very sad.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, they get caught up in the story. I experienced that myself. Is this getting caught up in the story? And I think of Paul getting caught up to the heavens and his mystical vision.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that one, Paul, but nonetheless, they get caught up in their own mystical imagination. And so when they come out of it, they're on edge. They're living in fear because of the
Yep.
propaganda that was shoved down their throat.
100%.
And so they're seeking anything that
Mm-hmm.
can give them some sort of peace without realizing that they can have that peace and they don't need to go searching around.
Yeah.
And so instead of them, I see a lot of people that are really interested in paranormal stuff using the fun little apps on your phone. You scan it around the room and it makes a ghost appear for you. Instead of searching for ghosts in your room, why not search for one who is truly formless, one who is truly beyond all things?
Yeah, I mean, Baruch Hashem, for sure. And that's, I think this is a very good example of how different avenues, I take a very, let's just look at the book. I'm probably like the least esoteric person you're ever going to meet, you know. When I left Pentecostalism, um it was basically like all those spiritual things I could attribute to, psychosomatics and all that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
speaking in tongues is all,
yeah,
it's all just your brain shutting off. And so I took a very, let's just get to the book approach, and I can um connect with Hashem through my studies. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have an organization like you're running, who people are hungering for paranormal knowledge, and you steer them and say, you know what, let's just go to the Torah. You know, you want to learn about the supernatural. Let's go to the basics. Let's learn what the Word of God says.
most
And
interesting thing here is that a lot of, and this is something I think I told you already, but when I was a paranormal, well, I still am a paranormal investigator, but when I was initially starting out as a paranormal investigator, to be more precise, I was starting from scratch, essentially. I wanted to build my framework from the ground up so that I would have a good system to analyze what's going on. Because I didn't want to go in there like Zach Baggins. Oh, it's a ghost.
yeah,
We heard something fall. It's a ghost, guys. Yell at it in English. This is a 500-year-old German castle.
yeah,
And so I didn't want to come at it kicking and screaming like the Ghostbusters. I wanted to come at it analytically. I wanted to know, can we even understand spiritual realm in any sense? And a lot of the conclusions I came to were oddly enough reflected in Torah, and most shockingly, when I started reading the Zohar, the very introduction of the Zohar proper captures a very important aspect I had noted,
Hmm.
and that was whenever something paranormal occurs, it will have, in a sense, a natural explanation. Not necessarily saying that the explanation is perfect for the situation, but that's what kind of gives you that little aspect that this was something different. It's where nature doesn't necessarily stop abiding under its laws, but willingly bends those laws in a way it naturally wouldn't, or normally in any circumstances wouldn't, for XYZ reason.
Right.
And the rabbis had noticed this when they wrote Zohar, when Zohar was written. There was this understanding that when Torah came to us, it couldn't come in the form of a person. Going to think like Philo's philosophy, the logos, it couldn't take the form of a person. It would be a very strange thing for it to have the form of a person.
Mm.
So how did we get this knowledge, the wisdom of God? It comes to us in a garment that is befitting of this world, for without that garment, we could not survive it, nor it here. So there is this, in a sense, this balance that must occur whenever there's an interaction. And I had made that same observation, and I came to the conclusion of, okay, well, where did this wisdom go? What
Mm.
is it? How do you find it? And when I read the Zohar, I said, it makes so much sense. It explains everything. Torah
Yeah.
is the answer. We
Torah.
were looking for it the whole time.
And how does Mishlei relate to Torah? It calls it wisdom. So yeah, it's beautiful.
And so to see
Beautiful.
how my own observations from a naturalist, in a sense, naturalist trying to balance out this eternal and natural realm, my observation from that standpoint uh, was in a sense confirmed when I read that, and I said, "There's something more here."
I mean, yeah. And that just, I know we've talked in our tour group and so on and so forth. And yeah, that brought you to where you are. And sometimes what's tough is, I have, you're coming from this, um, as you said, like this naturalist trying to balance things out. I came from the ministry side, and we're kind of meeting at this same juncture. Um, I think the hardest part of the transition now is being willing to be like, okay, this got me here. Now let's put what I've learned on the back burner and let Judaism teach me. Allowing the Torah to wash your mind, and then you bring it all back full circle and get the most 360 view of things. And yeah, and that's where trusting the rabbis and just that's a tough part, man, is learning how to be submissive to authority that we normally, like in Christianity, you want to just push all that stuff aside.
Yeah,
Like the rabbis, the oral Torah, what's that? That we don't regard that.
I heard
That's
that a lot when I was leaving. They would always say, they would quote the New Testament, "What is old will fall away," and God said it's forever. Did you not read? It says that right there.
right.
So
Yeah,
why is there this contradiction? How is it justified? The justification isn't that good.
exactly. So yeah, it's impressive, it's beautiful, and it's actually really cool how your journey is almost like the opposite of mine, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of working esoteric backwards, and I so it's just cool to see how Hashem can bring us from wherever we're at, wherever our personality dictates. You have a mind and a personality that is captivated by the supernatural, and I was more of like the classroom nerd, let's just look at the book type thing. And Hashem brings us to the same point because he needs that. We need that. We no two people are the same, and he willed it that way. So yeah, beautiful story, beautiful, and beautiful testimony, man. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing that with us. And yeah, if you have any advice for the listeners on if they're struggling with questions or being abused, friends leaving, what would that be?
So first, I want to say thank you for having me on. It's been a blessing to be able to come up here and talk about this and
Yeah, for
get to
sure.
share my story.
Mm-hmm.
And as for advice, I have several pieces. The first one is if you are really interested in spirituality and the spiritual realm and studying more esoteric matters, get a firm foundation. If you want to study Kabbalah, get a firm foundation in Torah, get a good teacher, start from the foundation and build up. If you don't, you're only setting yourself up for disaster. You're only setting yourself up for misinterpretation, misapplication, and in some cases you could get yourself hurt. So please be very careful. It's a very interesting field, but you can look very foolish if you're not cautious.
Mm.
So always be cautious when you're studying this stuff, and two, it can get dark. I was kicked out very quickly, and I kind of as soon as it started happening, I kind of split. I was like, okay, yeah, they're planning to kick me out. I dipped, and so I ran. As I've heard, leaving the dust trail behind. Yep, I very much left the dust trail behind. I'm pretty sure they're still coughing, to be exact, because I ran.
Nice.
But don't take it too personally.
Yeah.
They they are in the same place you were,
Yep.
and that's part of growing is learning not to look harshly on the Christians. They don't know. They don't understand.
That's great
It's
advice.
not their fault either. It's years of spiritual abuse on them from their own leadership. Even within the leadership, it's unbeknownst to them. They don't even realize they're doing it.
Mhm.
It's a horrible system.
Yeah. Systemic.
So don't hate them for being caught up in the system and them lashing out. They don't understand that they're lashing out. They don't understand. So don't hold it against them. Love them. Try and guide them. Let Torah shine through you. Let God's wisdom shine through you, and it'll attract them. They'll say, "This is sustenance. This is not the thin paper I get out of the New Testament. This is something."
Yeah.
So
Beautiful.
win them over with love.
Hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, all right, everyone. Stephen Martinez. It was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to hear the encouraging stories of the people who see through it, man, and have the courage and the braveness to, take that step forward and grow, because that's what it's all about. We're here to grow. But until next time, everybody, this was the Exodus Project, and we'll see you next time.